Hello and welcome to my ultimate setup guide for the Battlefield 3 support kit. Before we get started, there are a few things I need to address. Obviously, this is not my normal gameplay commentary where I present you with highlights and talking points from a single game. I would like to shy away from that for today, with more of a themed video. First, to preface the gameplay, this is rush footage on Operation Metro, maybe some other various places too. The rush server I was in with 300 tickets. Despite the fact that I ended up with a good score, I did not feel this was exciting enough to commentate over, so I'm using it as gameplay for an opportunity to do the class setup video, which I'm presenting you right now. And the reason I'm calling it a class setup video is because there are certain Battlefield 3 weapon reviews on YouTube made by commentators who attempt to educate you on a single weapon, sometimes even give that gun an out of 5 or out of 10 rating. The problem I see with this is you have 4 kits to choose from: Assault, Engineer, Support, and Recon. And let's not forget about the PDWs and shotguns as well that you can use on each of those kits. There's often little talk about the implication of a particular kit you're using, and all emphasis is placed on the gun only. An example of this would be how some players choose to use Engineer simply because they find weapons like the M4A1, the G36C, and the A91 to be favorable in close quarters due to the good hip fire and relatively high rates of fire. While I'm not going to tell you that this is wrong, I don't believe you're making the most of what's at your disposal. In a game of Team Deathmatch, for example, there is little use for an Engineer, as the only specialty tool that they could really use in that game type would be the small or the RPG. Whereas if you choose the Assault kit with a PDW, you can have the added benefit that you would get from a carbine by using a PDW, while still being able to revive teammates, while still being able to use the M320 as your explosive launcher. I think you probably get the point of what I'm trying to convey to you. Essentially, don't base your loadout on your weapon. Choose the kit that can best perform the needs that you have, and then make your weapon selection from there. I think it's sort of ironic that I give advice about the support kit, because I think most of us will agree that the support kit weapons are have a very hard time holding up against assault rifles and engineer weapons, both at long range and in close quarters. True, the likes of the M27 IAR approach the ease of use of some of the assault rifles, but you're still at a disadvantage as you have worse hip fire and more recoil. And even though some LMGs, like the M240B, have immensely high damage output per second, it's extremely difficult to control that weapon for most players, to put shots on target where you need them to go. And not everyone and not every situation will allow you to sit in one place on a bipod in order to control all of that firepower. Even more so at long range, where the high recoil and large bullet spread really are going to make scoring hits very, very difficult. The support kit is my favorite kit because of its ability to help your team hold down a position indefinitely because of the ammo box, and the ability to set somewhat controversial claymores in high traffic areas, or even more importantly, if you can sneak up on a vehicle, 3 C4s will ensure its instant destruction. There's no chance for anyone to repair it. It's very, very advantageous when you can pull it off. The only thing the class needs is a versatile weapon that lets players stay mobile, but retain the ability to shoot and engage enemies at any range. Well, the 2 weapons I'm suggesting were buffed in the last patch. They're both quite good now. I'm talking about the AS Val and the 93R. As a disclaimer, all of the stats I'm going to be using are from the Simthic.com site, a site you should definitely check out and support. I also think it seems fairly conspicuous that the fact that I'm saying these weapons are the best combo for this kit are in fact my opinions, and that I don't necessarily believe that there are no other good choices. I'm going to discuss the AS Val first, and explain to you exactly why I'm recommending it. At first, most people might make the statement, it's a PDW. Well, yes, it's in the PDW category, and it is an all-kit weapon, but that's not what makes this gun stand up to the task. First of all, go ahead and assume I'm talking about the Extended Mag's AS Val. We'll go for optics later. The AS Val is a gun that has a mix of extremes that overall work out in its favor. Now first, consider the most obvious and potentially important stat, its damage and rate of fire. It does 20 to 18.4 damage, and with the player health coming in at 100 in core mode, you can expect a 5 to 6 shot kill depending on the range and whether or not you hit the guy in the legs. with a high rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute. It matches the standard hip-fire accuracy for assault rifles, so compared to assault rifles it takes one more shot to kill in close quarters, but as you have a higher rate of fire than most of them, you're roughly going to be evenly matched at close range with assault rifles, which you might find surprising considering this gun is in the PDW category. The next extreme of this gun is its reload time. If you run this gun dry, which you'll probably be doing more often than you'd like considering its high rate of fire, it reloads in a somewhat slow 2.7 seconds if you run the gun dry with no round left in the chamber. However, if you still have a round in the chamber, this gun reloads in a blistering 1.6 seconds. That's faster than the M16 and only bested by the 9mm handguns. The next stat that is noteworthy is the recoil, which is noteworthy because it's really high on full auto. It can be difficult to compensate for. The recoil is mostly vertical with a slight pull to the right. To put it into perspective, the AS Val has a vertical recoil value of 0.4, and I believe that's measured in degrees, correct me if I'm wrong, while most of the assault rifles have a vertical recoil value between 0.2 and 0.3. The AEK 971 has a vertical recoil value of 0.2 with the same rate of fire as the AS Val, so essentially the AS Val has twice as much full auto recoil as the AEK, to put it into perspective for you. Now before I tell you about this gun's initial recoil, I need to put it into perspective also. Every gun has a first shot recoil multiplier. Guns with a low first shot recoil multiplier are easy to burst fire and generally stay on target because of the low initial kick. Examples of this would be the AK-74M, the AKS-74U, the KH-2002, and the AN-94, all having their first shot recoil at only 1.5 times the normal recoil, which is considered only 50% more for the first shot, so it's not going to be all that different from each subsequent shot after the first shot. While guns like the AEK 971 and the F2000 have a high first shot recoil multiplier of 3.0, making it harder to land subsequent shots at greater distance and harder to burst fire as well. Now this may come as a shock, but the AS Val now has a first shot multiplier that is less than 1, and I don't believe there's any other gun in the game that actually has that characteristic, meaning its first shot recoil is actually less than each subsequent shot. Specifically, the recoil of the first shot is half of the 0.4 that you would normally be suffering on the vertical recoil, making it only 0.2. This translates into the AS Val being an absolute burst fire beast machine, being one of the few guns in the game I'd say is actually worth switching to semi-auto when it's called for. Another stat that is noteworthy is the bullet speed, and it's actually not good. The AS Val has a relatively abysmal bullet speed of 333 meters per second, which is much less than the roughly average bullet speed of other weapons, which I would guesstimate to be about 600 meters per second. This means hitting moving targets at a distance is more challenging, although the bullet speed is similar to other weapons that have a suppressor added, as the suppressor slows down bullet speed for pretty much any weapon you put it on in this game. The next and final stat that I'm going to bring up is the weapon's bullet spread. We already covered hipfire spread, so now we're going to be talking about aimed spread. Hopefully it comes as no surprise to you that when you aim in Battlefield 3, your gun is not perfectly accurate. At least that's not the case with most weapons. While moving and aimed, the AS Val has a spread of 1.5 aimed accuracy, which is on par with the light machine guns, which, as I probably don't have to tell you, is not very good. You're going to want to be standing still when firing this gun at a distance. To put things into perspective, once again, the standard spread for assault rifles, standing and aimed, is 0.2, the standard spread for engineer carbines is 0.4, and the standard bullet spread for light machine guns is actually 0.6, being the worst of them. It's also noteworthy that the bolt-action sniper rifles actually don't have any spread at all. Their spread is 0, meaning they're perfectly on target. You only have to compensate for the bullet speed and bullet drop. So what do you think the spread on the AS Val would be? Well, actually, you may be surprised to learn that the aimed standing spread of the AS Val is 0, exactly the same as the bolt-action sniper rifles. The first shot will always be perfectly accurate if you're perfectly accurate. So combine that with the fact that this gun is a burst fire machine, and you have a gun that not only does well in close quarters and medium range because of its assault rifle traits, it also excels at long range, capable of picking off stationary enemies with ease, and specifically I'm talking about snipers. So knowing all of these things about the AS Val sort of begs the question, what optics should be used on the AS Val? The Cobra sight is usually the go-to for most PC players, as well as many console players, for its excellent field of view. The red dot is sort of similar. You get the benefit of having a more accurate dot on your gun with a slight sacrifice to your field of view. However, I can't help but want to take advantage of this gun's awesome accuracy when burst firing at a distance. For that reason, I have to recommend either the holographic sight for the slightly increased level of zoom over iron sights, Cobra, and red dot, or the Russian PKA 3.4 times magnification scope can also be a good choice if you want to take full advantage of this gun's accuracy. And you may be especially tempted to use the Russian 3.4 times scope if you're pairing it with what I would say is arguably currently the best handgun in the game, the 93R. Without going into so many words as I did with the AS Val, the 93R is great for its high damage, killing in 4 shots at close range, relatively low recoil, fast reload, and fast rate of fire. It also has the highest magazine capacity of all the handguns. The 93R at close range actually has the same time to kill as the AAK-971, which hopefully you realize is also pretty monstrous at close range. The most recent patch has had the Glock 18, I would say inferior to the 93 in base damage and recoil now. The 93R is supposed to have the advantage of having to be burst fired instead of full auto, but it would be difficult to argue that any handgun is better than the 93R at this point in the game's current state. Whether the 93R buff was fully intentional or not, I'm not really sure, but I really have to say that you probably ought to be using it. One of the large downfalls of the AS Val that I haven't mentioned yet is that the gun chews through ammo very, very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, the support kit lacks a versatile weapon that can be used well in most situations. So essentially, I would say that running the AS Val on the support kit completely cancels out those significant disadvantages in both of them. You get unlimited ammo because you're going to be chewing through ammo very, very quickly, and you get a versatile assault rifle-like gun on a kit that sorely needs something to match the mobility and accuracy of assault rifles. And that's essentially why I'm saying that this setup for the support kit is the best in my own personal opinion. This concludes my support kit video setup. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this. This is definitely a stray from the norm for me for videos. I had to put a lot more time into this video, so thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.